Hi everyone, my name is Mukesh Kumar. I'm part of Microsoft's Azure Data SQL Engineering Group, and I'm responsible for Microsoft data modernization from SQL platform as well as from non-SQL complete platforms like Mainframe, Oracle, open source, Teradata, Netezza, etc. Uh, and with me, I have Raj Pochiraju. Raj, can you introduce yourself, please?
Thank you so much, Mukesh. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our session. My name is Raj Pochiraju, and I'm a principal program manager in Azure SQL Data. My team's core responsibility is to product manage the migration tools, database migration tools that help you to do the seamless migrations to Azure SQL platform.
Thank you, Raj. I'm gonna start sharing my desktop, and
Sure.
maybe just a moment, everybody can see my desktop. So, hello again, everyone. The topic for Raj and I to present in this wonderful event is around database modernization best practices and lessons that Microsoft Engineering Group and has harvested while white gloving large and complex customer engagements. Our focus in this would be um, towards SQL modernization as well as complete data platform modernizations that we have driven on Azure Data Platform. Uh, so I will start by introducing, and making you aware of different investments that Microsoft has to really accelerate database modernization. As I said earlier, whether it's SQL modernization or non-SQL data platform modernization to Azure Data and SQL platform. And then we will also tie back, just so it's very relevant for many of the folks in this event. We will talk about what are the typical migration project lifecycle, and really like with this whole investment, right? How Microsoft is going to help accelerate your transformational journey and your respective customers' database data transformational journey, right? What are the key modernization drivers? We will also touch upon some of the patterns, some of the FOD factors, like FOD being fear, uncertainties, and doubts, and the IPs that we have created, right, to really solve those unique patterns and FODs that we have captured so far. And then for whether it's for SQL or mainframe or Oracle complete platforms, we would also be talking a successful customer case study. Okay, with this, I will. With this, after this, I will be handing it over to Raj, and Raj will take us through, a quick overview of Microsoft tools and products roadmap in this modernization and migration space. And just as a reminder, we have another session which will focus on app modernization end to end, and that will have a even further deeper dive on Microsoft tools and products that Raj and I will be presenting. So to start with investments, right? I mean, Microsoft in last few years working closely with many of you and many of our esteemed partners and customers, we have really understood that by giving a rock solid product only and by giving an automation or accelerator only is not going to solve the problem in this enterprise space, right? Complexity around modernization is multifold. Whether you are talking app in isolation or data modernization or middleware modernization in its own isolation, right? There are multi layers of complexity, and there is no shortcut by just giving product unless we also start really white gloving customers and partners in their modernization journey, where we bring the platform knowledge, which is aided by our customers and partners, decades old application and business logic proficiency, right? And then like also understanding customer expectation from future state of the application post modernization. These are very crucial aspects to make any modernization successful, right? And hence, along with rock solid product and automation and tools that we are giving, a direct engineering white glove hand-holding and working together is mutually beneficial, right, for us to be successful. And then once we have undergone this cycle, how do we scale the learnings, unique learnings, complex learnings, right, with rest of the community, right, is also our responsibility. And for that, we have exclusive investments around, uh, database migration guide, which many of you might have used, and we are making a lot of investments around scaling the learnings that we are harvesting through our product services and the engineering white glove that we are doing with our product with our customers and partners. And just to enumerate, right, many of you already know these names, right? On migration tools and services, DMS, database migration service, DMA, DEAA, DAMT, Azure Migrate, and SSMA. These are some of the very popular tools that you might be knowing already, right? And you will see a glimpse of deeper dive, especially around DMS, DMA, and Azure Migrate in our other session, as well as a brief overview of that in when Raj talks about these tools. And then from engineering white glove and engineering led customer facing success experience perspective, data has exclusive investment to in the form of Data SQL Ninja. And then you might have already heard about fast track teams, engineering team that work that is currently working hand in hand alongside with many of you, right? And then from the scale perspective, datamigration.microsoft.com, this is an URL. If you don't know, please bookmark this, right? There is a lot of innovative things we are publishing and scaling through this. A quick glimpse of how what does that scale model looks like, right? So through database migration guide, you can pick a source, and that source potential targets, right, will be captured on database migration guide. And what we are doing is directly from engineering, we are adding and keeping this live, adding new contents, adding new findings, new IPs, right? We have harvested from customer engagements for each of these source and target pairs, right? And if you see quickly, if I'm switching to Internet Explorer to quickly give you a glimpse of how this database migration guide looks like. So you can literally select a particular source, right? And you can, let's say, select an indicative target, which you don't know, right? I mean, it's an indicative. But from Microsoft side, you are gonna get, right, all the pre-migration before you start. Like, we want to make sure that you are aware of all the gotchas, all the tools and IPs that we are harvesting directly from engineering, right? They will be listed there for you to consume, right? And as part of pre-migration, we'll give you very prescriptive guidance what to do, how to do, what are the gotchas. Similarly for migration. And then, as many of you know, being successful in migrating alone is not the battle won, right? I mean, that's just half the battle won. Unless you are well aware of the post-migration challenges and sustained requirements, right, for your workloads post-migration. And those things you will find on post migration. Again, just so we are level headed here, we are continuously improving this channel. We are continuously investing cycles to keep this up to date and make sure that you are benefiting from each source and target pair. Coming back to the PPT now. Now, I think we felt when Raj and I were preparing for this content, right, we felt that it would be really useful for you as our audience to really understand when we say we want to accelerate your journey, we want to keep you unblocking, right? What does that accelerate really mean, right? Like, many of you might be a direct customer of ours who are dealing with your end customer. Many of you might be from the system integrator community who are our very esteemed partners, right, to make customers' journey successful. What does this acceleration really mean for you, right? That illustration is something that we have tried to capture in this slide. These are typical migration project lifecycle, as many of you coming from SI industry would know. And then for each of these typical steps, what is the typical effort breakdown, right? So let's say if you're one, database migration project is of 1,000 hours, right? What would be a time allocation for different phases out of those total 1,000 hours that you are going to bill to your customer? This is a representation of that split across different phases. And then going back to my earlier statement around accelerating, right? How Microsoft is really helping you accelerate this journey is precisely in the phases that we are capturing here, saying that using our tools and services first party like DMS, DMA, DEA for SQL modernization, SSMA, DAMT, etc. for non-SQL complete migration, we are literally gonna help you. Our products are going to accelerate, right, your this these typical phases. Okay. Now after this, what all phases Microsoft as a partner, as a platform company partner, product company partner will help you accelerate, right? Till what phase, till what typical steps is something that we have also highlighted, right? Now this doesn't mean we are replacing these hours, right? What it means is that if you as a customer and us as Microsoft product and platform company, if we work together in a really good, well-oiled engagement model, there are chances that you can capitalize on these accelerated hours, right? Leveraging tool services and the the IP and assets and direct engineering outreach that direct engineering support that you may have, you can really help improve your bottom line. You can increase your savings, right? If you are an SI partner, but if you are a customer, right, you can really accelerate in your time to market, right, with this end-to-end effort. And this slide really represents this, and I'm sure this will be available to you offline to access. And feel free to reach out, right, if you have any questions or if you have any suggestions on this content. Moving to next item, which is key drivers. Again, I'm not gonna spend a lot of time on key drivers. These are some of the common drivers that we have harvested and we are seeing. Doesn't mean we are, these are the only drivers we are seeing in marketplace. There are many, but these are some of the very frequent ones that we are seeing in the marketplace. And it's worth highlighting and sharing with all of you. So compliant, right? Like staying compliant, let's say PCI compliant or HIPAA compliant workload or SOC compliant workloads, which let's say are running on end of support and they need to really stay compliant with in support, in market products, right? That's one of the key driver for customers and partners to trigger a modernization work stream, right? And this applies for industry players, ISV players, off-the-shelf, commercial off-the-shelf product providers, right? And that triggers the modernization opportunity. Other is business driven, where business needs to have better scalability, right? Agility, not just in terms of infrastructure provisioning, but end to end, right? Like agility to go introduce new business functionality in a new marketplace with no restriction around how many users they can serve at any given point of time, right? So you can interpret a scale in many ways, but scale new business functionality, right? HADR, there are a lot of use cases which is triggering for modernization where, let's say their end customers, end customers, or our customers directly are asking that, hey, I need to now move my business SLA from double nines to 4.9 availability, right? I cannot sustain my business with just one site deployment. I need to have multi-site and I need to have active DR setup, right? I also need to have hybrid models established where either downstream or upstreams are being provisioned outside of my current already overloaded data center into Azure, so that I can do extra activities in cloud, leveraging the cloud value prop, right? Um, and then of course, cost reduction, right? Everybody is hard pressed to reduce on their capex and opex, be it for hosting, right, expenses or for their operations. They're looking at these modernization drivers. I have already talked about new market reach out B2B or B2C. There are many large implementations that's ongoing right now, modernizations. They are being triggered due to the new market requirements. With this, uh, I just so we are in a context, right? When we talk about data modernization use cases, typically there are three-step process, and we call them as use cases, right? The very first use case is schema and data migration, which is a one-time activity, right? The other one is depending on your workload. If let's say your workload is of a batch type, right? You need to have a data replication and sync capability, uh, which is okay to have near real time ability to sync, right? Again, there are complications there. Like, are you talking about one way replication? You're talking about two-way replication? Are you talking about reverse replication? But that's one legitimate use case that we all undergo, right? The third use case is change data capture for, let's say, many of the online applications, either with UI or headless online applications. They always would need real-time sync, right? Change data capture, real-time sync. So irrespective of whether you are doing a SQL modernization or a complete data platform modernization, all of us will undergo these three use cases in one way or other, right? Complexities also vary case to case, but in general, these are the three broader use cases that we see in marketplace. Okay. Now, what Microsoft is really doing to solve those three use cases that we just talked about, right? And how for SQL modernization, right? What are the different trends we are seeing, adding to some of the trends we just talked about slide before the use cases slide. We will talk on this page. So for schema and data migration, right? Of course, aligning to your SI lifecycle, you have to undergo assessment process, you have to undergo object and scope, schema migration, then you will do one-time data migration, right? And then, as I said, second and third use cases, data replication and sync, right, for batch and near real-time cases, and then change data capture for actual real-time data replication. For these phases, Microsoft has well thought through, right? Different ways, different automation, different products, right, to really help you. And I'm confident that many of you are already using. And hopefully, this illustration of how DMA, DMS, ADF, SSIS, and other third party tools where we are co investing to solve this complex problem around data replication and CDC are helping you, right? Putting this into a use case context would give you a better idea of how Microsoft is thinking end to end in this complex problem space, right? Um, we also wanted to make sure that you understand from us like what are the trends we as product company, right, our platform company are seeing from SQL modernization. So definitely SQL end of support is one of the trend. HADR we talked. Data center modernization, app portfolio optimization, compliance, we had talked on the previous slide, cost, new business requirement, new markets. I'm not going to go in depth on these trends because we have just talked and this should not be a news to you. Many of you already know this, and there are many more, as I said earlier. But then for us, like what are the challenges we see every day, right? While talking to customer and partners are irrespective of what the trend is, right? These are some of the frequently asked questions, right? And very subjective problem statement that will be given to us. Like, okay, so I want to move as a customer, I want to move my SQL estate. Majority of my SQL estate has, end of support. We need your help. Tell us how the target architecture would look like, what would be the migration path, and hey, you're moving from a unsupported version to now supported version on cloud or on-prem, right? What happens to the deprecated features, right? What is my compat? Like, will I have to go recode at app layer, right? What would be my performance and so on. So these are the majority of the FUD factors that you will also encounter. Uh, Now, so when we have approached customers through better prepared assets, IPs, and end-to-end methodologies that you will have access through migration database.migration.com. I want to I would love to share a case study, right? It's a public case study that we recently harvested at NHS London, and many of you might know about NHS. It's a public sector healthcare provider, um, which uh, uh, which which helps different healthcare units to leverage the key government data, right? And helps them predict the healthcare solutions, right, for their habitats. Now, this whole thing was working earlier on SQL, and of course, right, with the growing need in healthcare, NHS being such a large customer, they were not able to cope up with the demand, right, from different counties, different districts within that country. They they underwent a pilot process with us, and we modernized them from SQL on-prem to SQL managed instance. And we are very happy to report that NHS has not only successfully done the business side of migration, but also on technical and operational and commercial front, they have secured a saving of close to 13x, and this is phenomenal for a government sector. Okay, their ability to go and serve more and more districts and counties have increased exponentially, right? And there is a video that I would recommend. Go to microsoft.casestudy.com, and you will find out a video where video case study reference that talks about very specific bets that NHS NEL took on Microsoft Azure Data Platform, leveraging SQL MI as well as SQL DW and SQL DB to really modernize their portfolio. With this, Request is another customer. Again, this is available on case study site, and we would highly encourage that you spend some time going through these case studies. Video will not work, otherwise I would have loved to run the video. And I'm trying to be cognizant of the time left. So let me take you through some of the heterogeneous migration patterns that we are incubating, right? Earlier we talked about SQL modernization, but in this remaining 5 to 10 minutes, I'm going to focus on Oracle mainframe and AS400 type of data modernization. Um, just wanted to also let folks know that there is a huge bet, right? Whether you are working with Azure or AWS or GCP, uh, customers are not only looking at x86 data modernization, right? They're also looking at massive legacy data modernization. Many of you already know people want to modernize away from Oracle, right? They want to come on SQL and Azure Data Platform for various reasons, licensing being one of them, right? Ease of scalability, ease of transparency in the compliance and audit process. There are many more other triggers, and some of the trends we have tried to outline here. Same applies with mainframe, right? With the aging skill set in that area, their businesses and competitors being on the transformational journey since last 2 3 years. There are a lot of many enterprises who are feeling left out, right? And they want to embark on mainframe and Oracle and Teradata and Netezza modernization. And we are seeing some of the trends that we have listed. It's a duplicate of what you have seen already on the SQL side, but uh, the consolidation, right, and their desire, like enterprise desire to come on a single database platform while migrating from either SQL or from Oracle or mainframe. This is one goal that many of the enterprises are striving to achieve, right? And we are seeing a huge demand, huge uptake on this line, where Oracle and mainframe and mid-range customers are asking for help, asking for product and engineering recipes, right? Architecture artifacts, IPs, and assets that can really help them solve this complex problem. Okay, and from these customers, of course, the key FUD factors, right, the fear, uncertainties, and doubts that we end up resolving is, of course, migration path, as we talked on the SQL migration, But then also like target platform selection, and I have a slide. I'll quickly talk about target platform selection, and then what accelerators Microsoft you really have, right, to unblock us from mainframe and Oracle modernization. And then like the third highlighted item on this slide, as you see, is like how do we make sure as a customer, right, that while we are migrating from mainframe or Oracle, there is a hybrid integration in place, right? And hybrid integration means many things to many people, right? Just to simplify, hybrid integration and coexistence in this context is when a multi-year mainframe or Oracle project is kickstarted, the business also has to run at the same time, right, on mainframe and Oracle. And then there has to be a DevOps setup between, let's say, COBOL and PL SQL, DB2 and Oracle database tiers to ensure that the SI process of this modernization drive, which is, let's say, 2 years long, they are also in sync. So if the customer is making changes in PL SQL on Oracle side or COBOL on mainframe side, and also on the DB2 side, they can transfer, they can keep the .NET or Java and SQL or PostgreSQL or Cosmos DB, right, depending on what their target is, in sync during the SI phase. These are like some of the very big factors that they are looking for Microsoft to solve. And if I go to the next slide, right, while you saw the target selection, like customers often are puzzled, right? Like, hey, I have Oracle. What targets do you really support, right? I have DB2. What targets data platform do you really support? And we are pleased to inform that Microsoft Azure Data Platform has multiple choices to offer, right? And also we are letting with this illustration, we are also letting you know that how easy or and how custom experience it would be for folks to, let's say, land from Oracle to SQL and PostgreSQL versus DB2 customers to land on SQL and PostgreSQL or Cosmos DB. This illustration should help you with that. Moving to next one, which is tools and accelerator in the heterogeneous space. I think you should definitely take a serious note on this. Again, as we talked on the SQL modernization side, we have we have also thought through on the complete data modernization space, and we are continuously thinking and improvising on this, right? So for assessments, object and schema migration, we have custom assessment scripts, right? That you can engage with us, and we can hand you over. Like there are a lot of customers who don't want any service or any particular tool to be run in their data center, right? And in that case, Microsoft has understood, right, that you would need some custom IP and scripts to go do this, and we have created those assessment scripts. And then if a customer allows for tool and service to really run in their data center of Oracle or mainframe, we have a product which I'm sure many of you might know is SSMA that can help you through assessment, object and schema migration, as well as one-time data migration, right? Then now comes the data replication and sync, as well as the real-time CDC. For that, we have investments in Azure Data Factory and SSIS, right? Azure Data Factory, through the standard pipeline, you have a lot more things that you can achieve. You can customize the pipeline as well. And then for advanced requirements, where let's say you have a need for advanced replication, right? Reverse replication. You can use SSIS to really customize any level of customization you need, right? To achieve those advanced use cases. Last but not least, DRDA, which is our host integration service product. This is another first party product from Microsoft side, which will enable the coexistence and hybrid integration, can also help you with the CDC use cases, especially for mainframe, DB2 and SQL workloads, and especially a scenario where you have DB2 and SQL in mix. You should plan on using DRDA. Okay. Uh, and then, so before I conclude and hand it over to Raj, I would like to go through quickly make you aware of one Oracle public case study, which is Intersoft. Intersoft has last year, last calendar year for us, they have moved their key B2B ISV product, right, from Oracle to Azure SQL DB. Okay. And as part of this, of course, they are also reaping the benefits of typical Azure cloud value props. But as part of business transformation, they are now in a position to compete with their tier one competitors in the same space, as well as they 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 are well equipped to do B2B level rollouts, right? As opposed to earlier, they were sticking to just B2C type of deployments. So with this transformation, they are experiencing a 360 degree business transformation in every aspect. And needless to say, right, they're saving in the cost, they're saving in the operations cost, and they're leveraging the security and the scalability value props that Azure by default provides. Next, on mainframe side would be, I thought it would be good to have a banking customer to talk about, where this customer, mBank in Poland, has gone ahead and moved their multi-year COBOL and DB2 deployment onto SQL and .NET Core, right? And it's again a public case study that's published on Raincoat side. And again, another classic example where Raincoat and mBank work closely with product group and Microsoft team to really solve this complex landscape. There are some custom IPs that you can leverage offline, like workload assessment framework. Give for a given database engine what your potential targets are, right? How that matrix looks like. And then, like Raj will talk about DMS and few other tools, first-party tools. But then, let's say, if you have a need to migrate logins, right, in its own isolation without using any tool, there may be few customers who want. There are a lot of customers who want us to do this, right? You can leverage these. And then DDL conversion to SQL DB and Synapse, like earlier called SQL DW. These are some IPs which are publicly available, and you will have link to this embedded into this PDF that you can leverage. But then these are all the assets that aids our first-party tools and services, right? And I think we have reached to a juncture where you need to be given a quick overview of what those first-party tools and services are. And for that, I'm requesting my colleague Raj Pochiraju to take over and talk about those. Raj, over.
Thank you so much, Mukesh. Let me start sharing my desktop first. Okay, so hello everyone again. What I'm going to be doing the next 20 minutes is, Mukesh really talked about some of the major investments that we are making into the migration capabilities. And one of those investments is to build the first party tools that really help you to do a seamless migrations to Azure. And I'm going to be introducing some of those tools that we built. And then I'm going to give a quick demo, a sneak peek into the tools, how you can really leverage those tools to do the migrations. But I'm also doing a deep dive into those tools in another session that we are doing, app modernization. There you will get much more deeper look into the tools, but at least in this session I'm going to introduce those tools and give a quick demo, so that you can really start leveraging those tools. And then I'm going to introduce the roadmap, what we have done so far in the migration tool space, and then what we have plans ahead for the next few months. And then I'm also going to introduce some of the resources that are really helpful for you to really learn more about these Azure migrations. So at first, let me introduce the specific tools and services. Throughout the session, Mukesh talked about some of these tools, but at the same time, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be aligning these tools with the migration journey so that you can really understand which tool to use when, right? So before I go to those tools, let me introduce the specific source and target pairs that we support using these tools that you can really migrate to Azure. On the left side, you see all the source pairs, like starting from SQL Server 2005 all the way up to SQL Server 2019, that you can really migrate to Azure SQL, which includes SQL servers which are running on the VMs, Azure SQL Database, Azure SQL Database Managed Instance. You can really migrate those databases to any of those Azure SQL platforms. And then when it comes to heterogeneous sources, you can really migrate from Oracle, Sybase, DB to the respective Azure targets here. In the open sources, we help you to migrate or support you to migrate MySQL and PostgreSQL to Azure Database for MySQL and Postgres respectively. We also have a support migrating from Oracle to Azure Database for PostgreSQL as well. And in the NoSQL database space, we can migrate from MongoDB to Cosmos DB. So those are the source and target pairs. Um, Not only that, we support you migrating from on-premises environment, but we also support you migrating from other clouds like AWS and Google Cloud to Azure platform. So those are the spectrum of or the landscape of the sources and targets that we really support you to migrate. Now, coming back to the specific tools, in a typical migration journey, you have different phases that Mukesh is talked about, and one of the key phases is the discovery and assessment. And you really want to discover your estate and also find out the readiness of those estates migrating to the Azure platforms. So for that, you can really use Azure Migrate service which is a fully managed service on the Azure, which really help you to discover your environment, find out those application dependencies, and then also find out the target fit and all that stuff using the Azure Migrate service. And then there are specific tools like DMA, Data Migration Assistant tool, that really help you to assess your on-premises SQL Server databases and then really give you a readiness report. It also help you to find out the right size or a right SKU on the Azure SQL side that can really meet your application requirements. And then we also have a tool called SSMA, SQL Server Migration Assistant tool, that Mukesh talked about when it comes to the heterogeneous sources like Oracle, Sybase, where it really help you to do the schema conversions migrating to Azure, and it also help you to do the migrations as well. And then we have a tool called Database Experimentation Assistant tool that really help you to do the performance validation before you do the migration. And then when it comes to the actual migration, we have a service called Azure Database Migration Service, a fully managed service on the Azure that really help you to do migrations with a near zero downtime migration experience, which I'm going to quickly show you the demo. And then with that, I think I'm going to switch to demo where I'm going to quickly show you how to migrate the on-premises SQL Server databases to Azure SQL. So at first, remember I talked about the very first thing that you wanted to do the migrations is to do the assessments. But before we go to the assessment, let me introduce you my sources. I got two SQL Server instances here. One is running on SQL Server 2017 version. The other one is more of a legacy version, which is SQL Server 2008 R2. And both of these instances are hosting bunch of these databases. Here, my goal is that I really want to understand how ready these SQL Server instances, how ready these databases migrate into Azure SQL, right? For that reason, I need to really do an assessment at first. And as I said, I know the tool called Database Migration Assistant tool that really help you to assess your on-premises databases and then give you the readiness report for you. This is a desktop tool which is freely available on the Microsoft Download Center that you can really download it. And once you download it, you would install in your on-premises environment on a machine which has access to your source SQL servers. And then simply once you install, the tool is going to look like something like this. The very first step that you're going to do once you install it, you're going to be doing a migration, you're going to create an assessment project here, which is simply provide a project name, and then you provide your source type, and then your intended target, and then you just create an assessment, and then you just run that assessment. So for the sake of the time, I already ran some assessments here for these two SQL instances that we talked about, and then I'm going to showcase the assessment results for you. As you see here, there are a couple of options here. One is the feature parity, where we really look at your SQL Server instance as a whole, and then we will look at the specific SQL Server instance level features that are currently in use and whether how ready they are migrating to Azure SQL in terms of the supportability of those features. As you see here, for the instance, which is a 2008 R2, there is one feature which is a file stream that is being currently in use, and this is the feature that is not being supported on the managed instance. So that's the so this and also it gives you the impacted database that is currently using this feature, so that you really understand whether you want to migrate the database to a managed instance or whether you want to migrate that to the VM. At this point, this database is not ready to migrate to managed instance. You might want to migrate to a SQL VM. So that way you can really find out the features at the instance level. But there is another capability which is called compatibility issues. We look into your database schema and then find out if there are any objects that are currently using any legacy syntax that might not be supported on the target Azure SQL. So we could really call them as breaking changes. That means after the migration is done, you need to make sure that you fix some of the stored procedures with the recommendations that we provided here, so that that stored procedure is being supported when you migrate to Azure SQL. So you will really get a comprehensive review of all these databases here. Some databases are reported some objects that are going to break that you need to fix it. Other databases are ready to go. There are no compatibility issues, but other databases have some issues, kind of stuff, right? So you really get this kind of a view when it comes to migrating to the Azure SQL. But if you think about you have hundreds of those databases and you really want to understand the readiness of those databases. I know looking at each of these databases in this specific tool could be really a time consuming operation. So what we did is you can really assess any number of SQL instances that you want to really assess, and then start uploading those results to the Azure Migrate service that I talked about. Once you do that, the Azure Migrate service will give you a summary view of the readiness of those databases like this. So this is an Azure Migrate service, which really help you to provide a unified migration experience across your servers and databases and applications. And these are the assessments that I already uploaded to the Azure Migrate service here, so that you can really get a summary view of those databases ready to migrate to Azure. So you will see the number of SQL instances that are assessed are 4. The number of databases, how many of them are ready to go to Azure SQL versus how many of them ready to go to a SQL VM. And then you can further double click on those instances as well. It will really give you the instance level readiness, whether 100% ready to go to managed instance or the Azure SQL or not. For example, if you look at the SQL Server 2017 one, which is only reporting 87% ready to SQL Pass. So if you really want to understand why it is only ready for 87%, you can click on that further. It will take you to the individual databases, how ready those databases are migrating to Azure SQL Pass versus VM. So if you look at most of these databases are ready to go to the Azure SQL DB. There is only one single database which is not ready, which is a database which is having the multiple log files, which cannot be migrated to managed instance unless you really refactor those log files to a single log file. So that's the reason it is being reported as a migration blocker. But otherwise, all the rest of the databases are ready to go to managed instance. So that way, that is the only reason why you see the whole instance is ready for 87% because of this database. But at least it really give you this report really give you which databases are ready to go to SQL Pass versus VM, so that you can really make that kind of a decision, right? So once you know where to migrate these databases, the next step in your migration journey is to actually migrate. And that's where the Azure Database Migration Service will come into the play, where you can really use this fully managed service, which is free for you, that you can really use it to migrate to the Azure SQL platforms. So for that reason, it has only 3 simple steps. The very first step is that you need to create a Azure Database Migration Service at first, and then you need to create a migration project by providing your source information, your target information, and you start a migration. And then the DMS service will really do the initial loading of the data, and then also it start synchronizing the data that is coming with the ongoing transactions that are happening in your source, and then it will upload those transactions to the target, so that this migration can run continuously. And the final step is when you're ready to do the migration cutover, that is the time that you are going to be stopping all the incoming traffic that is coming into the source, and then you will take the final log backup, so that DMS can use that final log backup with all the last minute transactions that are coming in, and then upload those transactions to the target, and then at that point of time you're ready to do the migration cutover, right? So that is the process. This process is very well guided through creating a migration project here. So I'm going to create a test migration project for now, just to showcase how that experience is going to look like. Here you are going to be selecting the specific source that you want to really migrate. As I mentioned in my slide, there are multiple sources that we support through this service. And then you also mention where you want to really migrate to. Based on the Azure Migrate report, you would know where you really want to migrate your databases. In this case, I'm just picking up managed instance, and then you just create the migration project here. You also choose that which if you want to really minimize your downtime, you would pick an online migration project here, and then you simply create a migration project here. That migration project has got simple steps where you provide your source at first, you provide your target at that point of time, and then you also select the specific databases that you want to migrate, and then you provide a few migration settings here where you are going to be supplying us the backup files and everything, and then you establish a migration project. So for the sake of the time, I'm not really going through the experience, but if you really want to go through this experience in deep, I encourage you to come to my other session, app modernization session, where we will go much deeper into these steps actually. And then quickly, let me show you an existing project that I already created, which is Parts Unlimited here. As you see here, the migration is currently running, and then I'm going to double click on that. I have chosen only one database to migrate in this demo. So you click on that database here. As you see, there are a bunch of backup files are already uploaded, and they're already restored onto the target managed instance that you see here. So basically, for managed instance, DMS uses the backup files to do the actual migration. So we first take your full backup, and then we upload that full backup to the blob storage, and then we restore that full backup as an initial load, and then we also start looking for any of the log backups that will have incremental changes that are happening to the source, and then we upload those log files as well as they come in, and then we restore them log files there as well. So that's the reason you are seeing a bunch of these log files that are already being restored, um, and then this migration is going ongoing at this point. So when you're ready to do the migration cutover, at this point your source is still online, so your migration downtime is not really started. When you really want to do the migration cutover to finish your migration, that is the time that you stop all the incoming traffic that is coming into your source database. In this case, it is a 2017 instance, and then you take a final log backup, and then you provide that log backup to the DMS, and DMS will upload and restore. Once the restore is done, you simply hit a start cutover button so that you can really finish your migration. So that's that experience, how it is going to look like to do the actual migration using our service. But again, I'm going to go much more deeper into these migrations experience in my next session. So as part of this demo, we introduced the DMA tool, which really help you to do the assessments on your SQL Server instances. And then we upload those results to the Azure Migrate service, where it really give you a summary view of the readiness of your databases migrate into Azure SQL. And then we use the DMS service to do the actual migration. So with that, your migration will be complete with our tools, right? So I'm going to conclude my demo and quickly return back to my slide deck, so that I'm going to introduce our roadmap as well here. So let me quickly start this slide deck here. We finished the demo. And then if you look at the roadmap in the FY20 H1, we really released a lot of capabilities to our existing tools. One of them is that I really call out very high is the DMS hybrid. So if you look at our current DMS service, which is a fully managed service on the Azure, requires a site-to-site connectivity between your on-premises environment and Azure. It can be done through either express route, or it can be done through a VPN connection between on-premises to the cloud. But in case if the customers don't have that kind of a facility, they can use really a hybrid DMS, where you can really install a DMS service in your on-premises environment itself. At that point of time, you don't have to have this site-to-site connectivity. Or the hybrid DMS also help you when your site-to-site connectivity network bandwidth is pretty low, or you don't want to use that for migrations, then you can simply leverage hybrid DMS service to do those kind of migrations. It just makes your migrations much simpler in terms of network requirements. And then when it comes to the going forward plan, we have today the DMS service does not support the migrations to Azure SQL VM as a target with minimal downtime experience. So we are going to be enabling the migrations to the Azure SQL VM that minimizes your migration downtimes. We call that as more of an online migrations, which is coming by the end of this year. And then the database assessments are much more fully integrated into Azure Migrate, where you will have an end-to-end migration experience in the Azure Migrate itself, so that you don't have to go through an experience where you need to upload your files to your assessment to the DMA. So you can use Azure Migrate service itself to do a full-blown discovery, full-blown assessment, and find out the SKU recommendations. And you also get the monthly estimates in a single service to give you an end-to-end experience there. And then we are also going to simplify your migration experience by bringing the migration experience into some of the client tools like Azure Data Studio, SQL Server Management Studio, that really helps you to launch your migrations from these client tools that you are already familiar with it. So we expect that your migration experience is going to become much more simple. These are the major investments that we are making into the next planning cycle by end of this year. So with that, I'm going to conclude with the session resources here. We have a bunch of resources here that really help you to understand these tools and overall the migration journey. You can take a look at it. With that, I'm going to be pass it back to Mukesh to conclude our session. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Raj. I think we are on top of the hour, but as Raj said, please refer the session resources, and our emails are in the very first slide. Please feel free to reach out if you have any questions or challenging customer or very complex scenarios that Indian can help you out with. Thank you so much for watching this live session, and we look forward to getting some questions on this. Thank you.